Hi, my name is Trina Baker, and this is my video for the Math Center project. And the title of my Math Center is Groups to Share. And I have it all set up in this box like I would in the classroom. That way it'd be easier to take out and put away. Have the title there in the box so students and I can recognize what's in the box. The purpose of the activity is primarily to help illustrate multiplication and division through grouping, as is outlined in the Kansas Common Core State Standards for the 3rd grade, which there's a standard for multiplication and division outlining students being able to interpret multiplication and division in essence through grouping. The specifics of that standard I outlined in the outline for this center that'll be uploaded in Blackboard. But basically how the center works is that the students will come over, and first, before they start anything else, they'll take out a piece of notebook paper, and either you can keep pencils with the center, or you can expect students to bring their own pencils. But they'll start out by taking a piece of just blank notebook paper and writing their name on the top. And possibly the date if you like to be more organized like that, but especially the name so you know who did what. And after they have that ready, then you can have them take out the circle chart. Now I have actually 2 pages here because I didn't have any paper that was big enough to put 10 circles on. But if you had a bigger piece of paper like a poster board or something that you could fold and store in a box, you might be able to use that too. Also, if you had bigger papers, you could probably draw bigger circles and use bigger manipulatives. But basically, I've numbered each of the circles so that the students know that there's 10, kind of like when you use a 10 frame. And so there could potentially be up to 10 groups that students can put the manipulatives in so they can better visualize the multiplication and division, dividing up into shares by placing the manipulatives in the circles, and they'll know there's that many available. But since it's the 3rd grade and they won't be getting into too hard a multiplication yet, I figured if I made groups up to 10, that would probably be sufficient to begin with, especially since it's loosely based on a 10 frame model. So the students, there would only be one of these in the box, and the students would take it out and put it on the table or desk that they're working on, or even the floor if they're working on the floor. It depends on how your classroom's arranged, so that they're ready and it can be between the group. And the groups of students that use this center, I would say possibly 2 to 4 students, maybe more if you have enough supplies. Now in the box, there will also be a bowl of beans. Enough beans that you could make a fairly large number with, so at least 100, maybe more, because you might lose some. But that way students can work together to either start out with a big number of beans and then divide it among the circles, or put a certain number of beans in each circle and see what it adds up to. Although it would be multiplying, but it's kind of like skip counting. Something that I've seen in the 3rd grade classroom that I've been working in. A lot of the students have a much easier time figuring out multiplication and division if they skip count. And I think using the circles and the manipulatives would help them to reinforce that idea in relation to multiplication and division, as well as just seeing visually what that number would look like. Kind of to get a better perception of, you know, the quantity of an item. Now, what I think is unique, I hope, about this center that students would enjoy would be not only are they just taking math problems and visualizing them by grouping, but they will be applying a scenario card to the problem. So the notebook paper that they wrote their name on at the beginning of the activity, either every other line or every couple lines, it depends on how big the students write. I'm not super concerned about the penmanship as long as the students and the teacher can figure out what numbers are being written down. So as long as they leave enough space between the problems, it'll probably be all right. But in a box, you could use a box like a cardboard box or recipe box. This is a box I happen to have handy. I printed some problems on some index cards, and you could use like completely blank cards they make, or you could use the recipe card type of cards that are lined on one side and blank on another. And they have more in here, but basically I wrote numbers on one side, and it's not super important if they're in order or not in order, unless you have something written down in sequence that you want them to kind of gradually work up. My idea was they would just be kind of a mix of different scenarios that students could work through that would help them to apply multiplication and division to real life situations. So I have for number 1 here, if I drew number 1 as one of the students will draw one of the cards and will read it to the group. And they'll try to work on it together. So if I drew the number 1, then the students would write number 1 as their first number on the page. That way you as the teacher would know which one they were trying to work on when you look at their papers later. But number 1 has a scenario printed on it that says, Joseph has invited 5 of his friends over to watch a movie. His grandma baked 24 cookies for them to snack on. How can the cookies be divided equally between Joseph and his friends? So the students would start discussing how they would figure out this problem. Something that students might jump to first is the number 5, but then they'll have to figure out, there's not just 5 people, there's 6, because you got to count Joseph too. So there's 6 people altogether that are going to share these cookies. So then they would look at their circles and work together to figure out, well, if there's 24 cookies, then they would have to take out 24 beans and try to divide them equally between the circles to see how many each person would get. And they would place them in the circles. And they could count out the beans first and then try to distribute them, or they could count them as they go along, putting them in the circles. And then if they end up putting them too far, say if they went all the way up to 7 and then they ended up that they found out, well, this isn't an equal amount for that many people. So they might go back. Another thing that they could do is that they could recognize, well, there are 6 friends. So they'll know that they need 6 circles. And then they'll keep putting beans in until it's 24. There's several ways that they could go about figuring it out. But after they figure out what they think that the problem is and what the solution is, then they will write on their paper the equation and the solution for it. So then when they agree on it, then they can illustrate that to somebody so that they'll be able to explain, okay, Joseph and his friends, that's 6 people, and there's 24 cookies. So 24 divided by 6. So they would get 4 cookies each. And they would write it out on the paper. 24 divided by 6 equals 24. I don't know how well you could see that in there, but yeah, there we go. If they want to include other notes, such as, since there were this many people, they needed to, get 4 cookies apiece. If they want to write that out too, that's okay. I would like for them to recognize both the equation and how it would apply. So if they do both, that would be great. But if they at least put the problem, that's the main thing that I'm going for to apply to the standards. But if they recognize how the story problem figures into the multiplication or division, then they might want to write it out in words too. So after they agree on what the problem is asking for, and they figure it out on the circles, and they write it on their paper, then they can draw another card out of the box of another number. So we have number 4 here. It says Chantel collects yo-yos and keeps them in special boxes so they don't get lost. So far, she has 3 boxes of 28 total yo-yos. How many are in each box? So there you have another division problem. So if they finish with that one, then they can go on to another one. I have a couple of multiplication examples as well. Number 3 has Jermaine and his cousin went to buy ice cream cones. If they both got 3 scoops of ice cream, how many scoops of ice cream would there be altogether? I would hope to put various situations in there that would illustrate both multiplication and division in scenarios that would be meaningful to students and that they could remember later. Well, we're going to go and buy a pack of stickers or gum or whatever, and there's this many people, how are we going to all share it? A lot of what is shown in the text of sharing problems and what I've seen in the class, they really take to equal share problems because everybody wants to be fair, especially in the 3rd grade. Everybody wants to be fair. So division problems, I think, work really well. The multiplication problems, they may have to think about a little bit more depending on how you word them. But I would put a good mix of different scenarios in multiplication and division in the box, so students would go through them. And I estimate that they would probably want to spend at least 10 or 15 minutes at this center, depending on how you want to rotate centers or activities in the classroom. So that would give them enough time to work on several problems, I would hope. And I'm hoping that they would at least get 80% or more correct on what they estimate that the problem and the solution would be. So after they finished with the center, then they can just put their cards away, make sure they pick up all the beans and the papers and put them all back in the box. And then I would probably have a separate basket nearby where I'll keep my things, like on my desk or table, that they can turn in their math items, specifically in like a basket or a plastic drawer, and then I'll know what those papers are for, that they're for the math center time. And then I can look them over and hand them back to the students and know if they had a good time practicing the multiplication and division. And I would also hope to get some feedback on how they had fun with the activity and how they liked the problems being more applicable to them than talking about, people going and buying a massive quantity of something that doesn't even make any sense. So I hope that this video has helped illustrate my grouping math center, and hopefully I can utilize this in my own future classroom. Thank you for watching.